We all want to feel peace in our lives. Peace in our choices, our beliefs, our relationships, and our environment. I've learned that this desired contentment is often found through holding on to less. When we pare down what we own, what we consume, and what we value, we're left with what's intentional, a personalized curation of what is important and true and useful to us. I'm Shannon Leyko, and you're listening to Paring Down, a podcast aimed at helping you declutter not only your home, but any area of your life that's overwhelming. Here, we're having interesting and honest conversations about the physical and mental clutter that drowns out what truly matters to each of us. And together, we'll learn how to pare it all down, not for the sake of perfection or becoming rigid, rather so we can move through life with less overwhelm and more joy, wisdom, and peace. Happy Tuesday, everyone. Okay, we are on our second of 3 installments of the mini-series here on Paring Down that I'm doing right now called Paring Down Travel, where I like to just focus on one topic for paring down the things that might overwhelm us about a subject, the things that might give us anxiety, and kind of get to the bottom of things so that we feel more confident about the subject at hand. And today is going to be a fun one because I have Caroline Bright on, an old friend of mine who is a flight attendant among many other things. And I just thought it'd be so cool to be able to ask a flight attendant like all the things that we should and shouldn't do while traveling from her perspective. That's like a professional who understands what's going on, as well as chit-chatting about flying with kids and, you know, pros and cons and tips and all of that when we have little kids with us in a metal tube 30,000 feet in the sky, you know, casual. Instead of giving you my normal intro of a guest like I usually do, I'm going to let Caroline kind of explain more about what she does and who she is, because there are a lot of different moving parts about who she is. But the reason I know Caroline is because she was Miss Vermont 2 years before I was Miss New York. I think that's right. Because I was competing in Miss Virginia at the time. I hadn't moved to New York yet. And I was really good friends with the girl who won Miss Virginia that year, Katie Hughes, now Katie Kodak. And she was good friends with Caroline. And so I became friends with like that class, like a couple of those girls in that class of Miss America through Katie. And Caroline was one of those. And then we just like really connected and we've been friends ever since. And so that was in 2010, so 14 years. So clearly I love this woman because she is a staple in my life and always will be. She is just like a ball of joy, which you're going to experience here in a second. So here's my conversation with flight attendant / everything else under the sun, Caroline Bright. You guys, I'm so happy Caroline's here. Caroline is one of my favorite people on the planet. She's your future vice president of the United States of America. And honestly, this is something that I've been wanting to just talk to her about on a personal level. And that is all things travel. She's a flight attendant. She's a lot of things. She's way more than just a flight attendant. But we're going to be like in the travel boat today, or the travel plane, I should say. Anywho, hi, Caroline. Thanks so much for being here.
I'm over the moon, Shannon. I love listening to the podcast. So when you were like, hey, would you consider coming on? I was like, sign me up. Put me in, coach. I am ready to play.
I'm so honored because, like I said, I knew that you have one of the busiest schedules of any human I've ever met, not because you overschedule yourself, but because you're so talented in so many different areas and you are so giving with your time and have all these different branches we're going to talk about. And I was like, I don't know if she's going to be able to have an hour for the podcast, but here we are. And so I'm so happy.
For you, Shannon, I always have an hour.
Listen, thank you. Okay, why don't you tell the people a bit about yourself? I know that's a hard question for you to sum up, but, you know, just kind of who you are and what your life looks like.
Well, the thing that I think is most important to know about me is that I am, first and foremost, aggressively from Vermont. That is about 80% of my personality is just maple syrup and Ben & Jerry's ice cream. So that is very important to know. Professionally, I am a flight attendant for a major U.S. airline. I've worked for them for about 9 years. And I am also completing my Master of Divinity degree as a Ministerial intern in the Unitarian Universalist Church, which if we could add more words, I'm sure we would try to, but we haven't managed to yet. So there's a lot going on. Oh, and P.S., the same week I started my MDiv, I found out I was pregnant with my first child, who was born 6 weeks before the pandemic started. And I am now currently pregnant with our third child. So why not have 3 kids while in seminary, while working and traveling all over the place? What the heck? Why
Yeah.
not?
Why not? Casual.
Oh,
Casual.
and the fun added layer of we are also a military family. Luckily for me, Joel is not on active duty right now. He is a Vermont Army National Guard officer. He's a lawyer for them. But we just finished 5 months of Joel being gone full time on active duty orders. And now he's back. So there's a lot happening there. We've done a lot of traveling because of that, and because we live primarily in Philadelphia, but I am from Vermont where my family is. So we haul around a lot, and I'm very tired all the time.
All the time. Same. I mean, same. But also traveling is so fun. And that does remind me that I want to do like a whole separate episode with you about your au pair, because I know that she is like a big reason why you survive with all the things you have going on.
She is arguably the reason I am alive at this point. And if not alive, she is the primary reason that I've been able to do all of these things. If anyone asks like, wow, how do you do all of these things? I'm like, let me introduce you to Izzy. So when I first heard about the idea of an au pair, my reaction was, that sounds like something for extremely wealthy people doing extremely wealthy things. I am not an extremely wealthy person doing wealthy things. And I was like, that doesn't sound feasible. But then I did some Googling and I looked into different au pair agencies, and I realized, doing the math, that in fact, having an au pair would cost less than having childcare for even one child. And it's a really incredible program. The primary focus is cultural exchange. And the added benefit is you have someone trustworthy, vetted, who loves kids, who comes to watch your kids. And some of our most aggressive travel has been to go to England and visit Izzy's family.
I love all of that. And your relationship with Izzy, I just think is so beautiful. Let's dive in a little bit today, because I want to talk about we're Paring Down Travel. That's this mini series. And so I want to get your insight as a flight attendant, but then also mom to mom. And those are kind of like two separate things. So let's start with flight attendant world. How did you decide to become a flight attendant? And what did that even entail? What was that process?
That process was a long time ago now. It seems like just yesterday, but 9 years ago, it was a different time. The internet was different. Twitter was still Twitter. It was a different time.
R.I.P. Twitter.
Right, exactly. No, at the time I was 24 and I was working in politics, and I was starting to get a little bit burned out on the political process. And I thought to myself, 24 is too young to get burned out on anything. And a friend of a friend said, hey, have you ever thought about being a flight attendant? And I said, no, I have never thought about being a flight attendant. And she was like, well, you have a lot of travel experience and you obviously like people, so why not try it? And I was like, yeah, you know what? Why not try it? And ultimately, I was flown to Dallas, which felt very glamorous.
Oh my gosh, it's like going on The Bachelor.
Right? It was very, and I completed my in-person interview. And at the end of the interview, the hiring people did this cute little thing where they were like, all right, we're pulling you aside one by one. We need you to do one last task. We have to have you read an announcement. And I was like, yes, this is what I prepared for. This is what I thought I would have to do. Have me do a voiceover, put me in. And they handed me a piece of paper and I started reading it. And it said, Dear Caroline, congratulations. We're pleased to offer you a position. I was like, what? And they said, keep going. And they made me read my job offer letter as an announcement. It was like the culmination of this interview, which is very cute.
Wait, that feels very a cappella group in college to me, like in the best
right?
possible way. Yes.
It was very fun. I somehow doubt that it's always done that way, especially now. I think it was just the particular interviewers who I had on that particular day, which was lovely. And a couple of months later, they brought me back to Dallas for our training, where we lived and worked and played and studied in this very intense environment for 6 weeks at the time. And it is hardcore, frankly. I was like, I don't know what to expect, but you go in having to have so much information memorized, including but not limited to like 200 airport codes. And the first thing you do is you take an exam. And throughout training, at least how it was structured 9 years ago, and I think it's still very similar, if you fail more than 3 exams, then you are out. And failure is less than 80%. So if you get a B minus, you are out. Um, and it's not exams on like, how do you put ice cubes in a cup? It's exams on like, where is every single piece of emergency equipment located on an Airbus 321 versus this model of an Airbus 321 versus this model of this type of aircraft. It's incredibly complicated. And then you do all of this hands-on emergency training, like firefighting. My personal favorite was hand-to-hand combat. And I did get bonus
Oh my
points
gosh.
for my creative use of a fire extinguisher as a weapon. So I came up with a new technique that my instructors hadn't seen before in training. So,
Wait, what was your technique? I need to know this.
I can't tell you that in public, Shannon.
Oh, right.
It's
That's right.
not
I'm sorry.
classified, but like,
No,
you never know who's
the
listening to
safety
Paring
of the
Down.
American people are at stake, and I completely respect that. But I think that's pretty awesome.
It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of hard work. It was very high pressure. When I graduated from flight attendant training, I was genuinely prouder than when I graduated from college. Because my college degree is in political science. Like, it was what I expected to do professionally. It was along the lines of what I planned. I never expected to go to flight attendant school. I never expected to have to learn all of these things well outside my wheelhouse. And I was so proud when I graduated and then got sent to the best base, which is Philadelphia. Thank you very much. It's the best base.
Is that how you ended up in Philly?
That is exactly how I ended up in Philly. And how I picked Philly was that it was the base with the most direct flights to Burlington, Vermont. So, boom, here I was, 25, rolling up to Philly.
Wow. So the training to me speaks to my next question, which are what are some misconceptions that people have about what a flight attendant does?
Well, misconceptions I had for sure were that flight attendants are there to serve drinks and, ask for help. If somebody needs help, they can page a doctor. But they're there primarily to pour drinks and make sure that you're not breaking any rules and to just say, no, no, sit back down. The seatbelt sign is on. That was my understanding of the situation going into training, to the point where I didn't tell people I was going to flight attendant training. And I was like, I wonder why. And it was because I felt embarrassed because of the cultural understanding of what flight attendants do, that it wasn't serious, that it wasn't for, people who wanted a real career, that it was just some kind of silly job that like flighty girls do. That was my perception.
I think that, right? It comes from this like idea of like the Pan Am girls, right? And
Mm-hmm.
then even like thinking about like a male flight attendant or steward versus stewardess is like a whole thing. It's almost like equivalent to this antiquated notion of like male nurses versus regular nurses,
Bingo.
right? And because of the way society is set up, it was very much something that we saw as a traditionally women's job, which then therefore must mean less brains, all about service.
And it was intentionally used as a marketing approach throughout the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. There were all of these marketing campaigns that centered around, ooh, come fly this airline. It's got attractive flight attendants, attractive stewardesses who are just here to have a good time. Like, the airlines run by men were intentionally capitalizing on this for marketing purposes. Absolutely. So no wonder that was the perception. So going into it, those were the misconceptions that I had. And then as I went through training, I was like, wait a minute, I was completely wrong about most things. Oh my. And by the time I graduated, like I said, I was more proud of that flight attendant training graduation than I was of my college degree. And after I started flying, I rapidly realized that flight attendants are some of the coolest, most amazing people you could ever meet in your life. They have to be incredibly intelligent for the most part, especially the senior flight attendants who have just outlasted so many changes in this industry, the after effects of 9/11, the chaos that ensued after that, the ways that our culture has changed dramatically. We have flight attendants who have been flying since the 1970s, since there were weight checks for them to continue to be flight attendants, since there were age restrictions and you had to quit if you got married. You couldn't have kids and be a flight attendant. And they are the same people who fought to get legislation passed in order to get rules like that changed, in order to unionize and have a body to advocate on behalf of flight attendants, because it is an incredibly physically dangerous job. It's extraordinary. These are people who have diverse, interesting backgrounds, who have defied stereotypes, who have literally changed the way that workers are treated in America. And they're just up there pouring you a Coke and asking you if you want chicken or beef.
Right. Well, I mean, that's what we see as the traveler. But on that note, what is a flight attendant's true main job?
We're there to save your life. We are there to save your life in every possible scenario. Obviously, it's incredibly rare, but if something happens to the aircraft and it needs to be evacuated, we are trained to evacuate that aircraft in under 90 seconds, no matter the size of the aircraft. There are a lot of videos that you can find online of recent aviation situations, and you will see that the flight attendants are usually yelling something in the background. And those are our commands. And that is what we use to tell you what to do in an emergency situation so that you don't get injured and, frankly, so you don't die. Basically, flight attendants are there to keep you alive. And the things I've seen, the stories I've heard, air travel is incredibly safe. And one of the reasons that it is incredibly safe is because you have trained professional flight attendants who are on board making sure that it is safe.
It's truly amazing, all the things that flight attendants do. So, with your experience, what would you recommend travelers never do besides like open a door and jump out?
Well, you can't. They can't. There are safety mechanisms. You cannot open that door. Now, if the door opens by itself, that's another issue. Boeing. Look, I'm an Airbus girl. That's all I'm going to say about that. Some of the things that you should never do on an airplane. Oh, first and foremost, for the love of all that is good, do not ask a flight attendant to put your bag up in the overhead bin. One of the things that people seem to really not understand is that it is literally not part of our job. I can assist you in putting your bag. Like, I can spot you. I can make sure you don't fall over. But if you have an injury or a personal circumstance that prevents you from putting your bag up in the overhead bin, if it's too heavy, you need to ask somebody who's nearby, or you need to have us gate check it for you. Because, this is a fun fact, we are not covered by insurance if we are injured in putting your bag up. And it is this very tricky thing where we are allowed to assist, but we can't do it for you. So please just don't ask us to put bags up. Just don't ask us to put bags up, please. Period. Full stop.
That insurance mess is crazy to me because
Mm-hmm.
like that's not your fault if someone throws a fit and you're like, it'd just be faster for me to put this bag up there. But you never know, especially like once you hit your 30s, you could tweak your neck just like turning your neck the wrong way, you know?
Exactly. And it's just such a careful balance because of course I want to help every sweet little old lady who asks me for help in putting her bag up. I want to help every single person who asks me for help. And it is so hard to say, I'm so sorry, but I am not allowed to do that. And that feels terrible. And then they're confused and they're upset and they're probably a little bit embarrassed. So it's just this complicated, convoluted situation that's been created by societal expectations, individual ideas around sexism, airplane luggage fees. It's a perfect storm. So the first thing you should never do is don't ask a flight attendant to put your bag up in the overhead bin. If you cannot put it up yourself or get it down yourself, ask people around for help or just gate check it. That is my pro tip there. Other things that I see people do that I'm just truly horrified by, please do not walk around with your bare feet or your socks on an airplane. There is liquid on the floor in the plane, especially in the lavatories. It is never water. It's never water on the floor of an airplane. Never think it's water.
I'm
Wear
dying.
your shoes,
I'm dying.
please.
Oh my gosh. One time,
Assume.
Anderson, I didn't realize it. My
Oh,
6-year-old was, and I didn't realize, like, he like went to the bathroom. I started following him and I looked down and like, oh no, buddy, we got to turn around and get those shoes right on those feet. And he like was throwing a fit. And I finally was like, you know what? Fine, go. And then the second we got back to the seat, I like took those socks off. I put them in the backpack. I had to change the socks. I was like, that's so gross. I cannot.
Sterilize his feet. Like, just get out those sanitizing wipes. I mean, truly, truly, it's always assume it is not water. Assume it is the worst possible liquid option.
Thank you for that.
That is, especially with kids. There are so many things that I would say don't ever do this that seem so obvious to me. Like, don't clip your nails on a plane. Don't stick your feet in someone else's space, like on their armrest from between the seats or along the wall coming to them. Don't invade other people's space is a pretty good rule. Seems pretty basic to me. If you have a middle seat, you get both of those armrests. If you are in a window or you are in an aisle, you get that armrest, and you get the wall or you get the aisle. If you are in a middle seat, you get the armrests. End of story. That's how that works.
Do you have to like mediate that for people?
Far too often. It's not every flight, in fairness to people, but far too often. And what's worse is I see people constantly being intimidated in those situations. So sometimes, like, if I see it happening, I'll say something, especially if it's like a younger woman with two large men on either side of her. You know, I'll be like, hey, girl, you know you get those armrests, right? Hey, guys, I know you're not going to put her in an awkward situation. You know, but I can't always be proactive about those individual situations. I try to be. I try to have people's backs.
I love you. I love you. You have no fear. It's awesome.
Well, you know, I do have many fears. It's just not that. And it's and that's one of the best parts about being a flight attendant, truly, is that as long as you can justify what needs to happen, you have the training and you have the experience to do what needs to be done. And that is my favorite thing about being a flight attendant. One thing that I always make a point to do is when I have a mom with a young baby who is like clearly trying to nurse or breastfeed in public, I will pointedly go over to every single one of them and I'll say, look, if anyone gives you trouble about this, my name is Caroline and you send them straight to me. I will handle them. And I did this before I had kids because I was like, oh, please, someone make my day. Make my day. Comfort this.
You're like, I will not have it. I will not
have Absolutely
it. Okay, so on a
not.
Similar but different note, what are things people who are traveling can do to be helpful? What are things we should be doing on an airplane?
When you enter the aircraft, make eye contact with the flight attendant and say hello. That, again, seems very simple, seems very basic, but one of the things that does is it hopefully lets us know that you're not a threat. Because what we're actually doing when you're coming onto the airplane is we're evaluating every single person. And we're thinking to ourselves, okay, are they going to be a problem? Probably not. Okay, neat. And we're thinking to ourselves, okay, in a worst case scenario, can I ask them to do something? If you come on in a fire department t-shirt or an EMT t-shirt, I am thrilled. Please, first responders, identify yourself to flight attendants because you are my favorite people.
So what you're saying is that a podcaster is not particularly helpful on an airplane.
Well, if you have extensive first aid training, or perhaps in a situation where we need someone to sit down and be quiet and we need a loud voice to help communicate that, perhaps that would be a scenario.
You're far too kind, Caroline. You're far too kind. Okay, so I want to kind of like make a little bit of a transition to your experience as a mom, but also as a flight attendant. Let's start with flights. If we have time, we'll tack on some car advice at the end. Let's start personal. Where have you, not all of the places because you've traveled a lot on the airplanes with your kids, but what are like some of the trips you've taken with your two children?
So the biggest trip that I've taken with the two kiddos, who at the time were 3 and 1, was to go to England to visit our au pair's family. She is from a very tiny town about 3 hours north of London. And when you travel as a flight attendant, you're traveling on flight benefits. You and your family have flight benefits. It's dependent on if there's space or not. And sometimes you have to kind of take a more circuitous route than you might have originally planned. So in our case, we actually were starting in Vermont, and we flew from Vermont to Philadelphia, and then from Philadelphia to Paris. We then flew from Paris to Leeds in England, as one does, and we rented a car and drove into rural England, and we had a great time. And then Izzy's mom drove us and dropped us off at the airport hotel, and we got to the airport the next day, and we were going to fly directly from London to Philadelphia, only to have our flight cancel. And thus many days of chaos and drama ensued for the remainder of this trip, and it was quite the story. But we've done some interesting creative travel, and weird things have happened while we've been traveling. Like, we got on the flight in Burlington, Vermont, barely. So we get on this plane, and people were so kind. They were like, "Oh, do you want us to move so that you can sit with the kids?" And they were incredibly kind. We sit down
You
on
were
the
like, I
plane.
mean, unless you would like to sit next to my 2-year-old for this flight to
I mean, you
Paris,
could
in which
feel free.
case,
Exactly. I was like, I mean, she's
be
very
my
entertaining.
guest. Do you
Trust
have
me.
snacks?
She's a good time.
Yeah, Betsy would be all about it.
She absolutely would.
She and JoJo,
So,
our daughters are like the same age. I feel like they would be
mhm.
super down to make a new friend on the airplane.
I'm honestly afraid for when they meet in person, because I feel like the rest of us are just going to like be steamrolled by them completely. It's going to be amazing.
I know.
So we, but we got on this plane. We all sat down. We took our seats that people moved to accommodate us for. Oh my gosh, how kind of you! Wonderful, amazing. There's a delay. Great, a plane delay with
Well,
two
and things like
toddlers.
that happen all the time while you're traveling, right? Like,
Absolutely.
we've done a lot of travel with our 3 kids too, all the way from Alaska
Hmm.
to Virginia or Alaska to Florida, and it's been every time there's a delay, something goes wrong, you're running to try and catch a flight. When you're trying to make a layover and you have to take the elevator because you have a stroller instead of the escalator, and one parent runs ahead, like these
Yep.
things happen all the time. So in light of the many different things that could happen or go wrong, or even, flying with kids is hard even when it goes smoothly. What are some of the like biggest mistakes you see parents do, or that maybe you've made before when it comes to traveling with kids, whether it's expectations, bringing things, wishing you had brought certain things, anything like that?
So I think the biggest thing to expect when you are traveling with small kids is that it is going to be terrible. If you set that bar basement level low, you are going to have a much better experience than
Bury
if you're
the
like,
bar in the ground. Dig a
oh,
6-foot grave for that bar.
absolutely. The bar should be at a point where it could not possibly be any lower. Assume that everyone will throw up. Assume that everyone will wet through every single item of clothing that they have. Assume that every flight will have a delay. Assume you will get trapped in an airport overnight. Just make these assumptions right now. And then, when it's not a complete disaster, it's going to be much better. Um, One major mistake that I see happen with a lot of parents when they're traveling with their kids, especially if they might not be as experienced when it comes to flying, let alone with kids, is that they assume that there are things available on the aircraft that are not available. They assume that we have backup diapers. They assume that we have hot water that they could mix a bottle with. They assume that we have milk for kids. And the reality is that sometimes we do have milk. We definitely do not have sanitary, potable hot water that you want to use to mix a bottle. You should be mixing that with distilled or bottled water, and then you could put it in a cup of hot water to heat it up. But you definitely should never use the hot water on a plane to make a bottle. Please don't do it. It is not safe. It is so not safe. Um, they assume that there are these things that are available, and they're not, and it breaks my heart every time. Like, to the point where I'm like, should I stock diapers in my bag? Because you've got to be prepared for that, and it's a terrible situation when they're not. So that's a really, really big one, is not making assumptions about what will be available to you while you are in transit.
Right.
Um,
And I do want to like say too, just to pipe in here, like as much as there aren't certain things available, and of course traveling with kids is really hard. I think you and I both agree that the point of setting the bar low is not to scare people, but it's so that you have a better experience overall, because it's very
Absolutely.
doable. Like
It,
it's really doable. I mean, we did it with our, let's see, what was the craziest? I would say the craziest was a 24-hour travel day with a 10-month old, a 1.5-year-old, and a 3-year-old. I mean, you just don't get more crazy than that, but it was
I watched it
totally
unfold on
fine.
Instagram, and I was like, thoughts and prayers, Shannon. Thoughts and,
Yeah, thoughts and prayers. Well, and one of the things that I was pleasantly surprised by, which I'm sure you've experienced too, is that you see all these like terrible things on the internet of like people being mean to parents with kids on airplanes. I have literally never experienced that. It is
Mhm.
always the opposite. People are always kind. People always want to help. Can I carry your bag? Can I open your stroller for you? Can I hold your child? Right? Like there are people who are willing to be there for you, and if not, then they most of the time they just have a kind word. You're doing great. She's so cute. Oh, don't worry about it. Like it's honestly not as scary as the internet makes it out to be.
Oh, that's been my experience too. I have been shocked by how kind people have been, by how supportive random strangers have been, and in like multiple countries, because they're like the chaos continued, right? And I mean, people helping to carry our bags, people helping to wrangle the children. Like it's been incredible to see how amazingly kind people are. The other thing that I think is so important to remember about traveling with young kids is yes, it is the same stuff in a different place. You are being a parent in a different setting. You are not going to like somehow magically get a break from your kids like kids. This is vacation. You need to sleep in, if anything, the opposite. Um, but it is so worth it. It is so worth it. And I've seen this meme online that's like, they won't remember, but you will, which is true. But to see these kids having these experiences at the destination, but also in process, to watch your kids learning about how to be in public, about how to be in shared spaces, about how to treat other people when you are frustrated, when you are overwhelmed. How do we behave? How do we do kind things for other people? How do other people do kind things for us? To have that kind of learning experience for them is incredible, absolutely incredible in the grand scheme of them being people.
You know, one of the things that I heard, I don't remember where, is that like kids are alive right now. They are not just future adults. They are fully, completely alive exactly as they are. And I know that sounds obvious, but I think sometimes we think, oh, we just have to kind of contain them and control them until they figure out how to be an adult. But realistically, even if they don't remember every little thing, like they are still experiencing it, they're still a human, they're still processing everything that they're going through, and they're very much alive. So the whole memory thing, like I get it, especially when it comes to certain like spending money, right? We want to make sure our kids remember. But at the same time, that doesn't mean there aren't benefits for kids and us to have them have fun experiences when they're a kid. It's not like we're going to just leave them in a black box for the first 4 years of their life until they like can fully remember everything. I mean, that makes no sense either. So, you know, it's a balance. Okay. And so, besides the lessons and mindsets that help with travel and make it so worth it, like we were just saying, I could go into like not sticking to a schedule or no rules on screens and things we personally we do differently than in daily life, but I want to move to the practical side of things in terms of what we bring to make our lives easier while we are traveling. So, from your perspective, what do you suggest that parents bring with them?
One thing that we brought that I felt really smug about was I ordered a multi-pack of washi tape, like multicolored washi tape, because you can stick it on anything. You can use it to make little tracks for cars to go on. You can stick it to the window. You can make stickers. Like you can do a million bazillion things. You can also use it to color code your luggage. You can use it for practical reasons. But this baggie full of washi tape, I felt very smug about. Very, very smug. There are so many, devices and accessories that are available online. Truly, some of the things that have been most useful have been our Yodo player, because Betsy loves to listen to audio stories. She loves to listen to audiobooks. I have not done as much screen time with her while traveling, not because I am opposed to it. I'm enthusiastically in favor of this while traveling, but because she went through a motion sickness period and I'm not totally confident in her stomach. So she thinks that Bluey has a podcast version, because what we've done, and we've done this in the car primarily, is I've downloaded episodes of Bluey to the iPad or to your phone even, and she listens to it on her headphones, but she doesn't see the screen. And so she thinks that there is a podcast version of Bluey where you just hear the episodes.
That's actually brilliant. Like, why have I never thought of that before? That's so
I
smart.
mostly did it by accident, frankly. It was an accidental situation that led to that. But having something that they can listen to. I've also downloaded actual podcasts, real podcasts that do exist and are great. Betsy has been very into the Wildcrats lately, so we've got
Oh,
the
yeah.
Wildcrats podcast episodes. There is a great podcast for kids made by Vermonter Jane Lindholm called But Why, and that's an excellent podcast for kiddos. And she did a cool interview with Chris and Martin, the Kratt brothers, that we really enjoy. But
Listen, Anders would be so into that.
yeah, he would love But Why. Like, side note from everything else, But why is like made for Anders. Love
Well,
this.
it's also the perfect name for a child's podcast, because if I have to answer one more why, and before kids, I used to be like, okay, you just answer the question. I'm like, no, listen. My daughter will like look at the street and be like, why isn't the car in front of us moving? Oh, honey, because it's at a stoplight. Why is it at a stoplight? Well, because they put the stoplight there to make sure we don't crash. Why don't we want to, or, why is it red? Well, because that's what tells us to not stop and not go. And then she'll be like, well, why? And I'm like, what do you mean? Why? Like, why don't you want to crash? And she'll be like, yeah. I'm like, because you could get hurt. Why? I'm telling you, I could go down to the molecular level with these why questions. I'm sorry. It's like, but it's a lot. It's insane. So that is a great podcast title.
That is why she made this podcast. And she's absolutely excellent. She's so talented. So that's one of my podcast recs while recording a podcast, which feels very meta, is
Super.
But Why? A podcast
Super
for
meta.
curious kids.
So I love the tape thing. I love this like Bluey podcast, fake podcast situation, and real podcast, because what you're speaking is my language, which is we're really paring down here. There are a lot of gadgets, and some of them might be really helpful. The problem, it's just like with all kids stuff, is you never know what's actually going to work for your kids and what will actually be used. Like I just put on Facebook Marketplace these inflatable footrests. They're probably illegal. You're like, as a flight attendant, you're probably like, please don't do that. But anyways, I got them. Good news, never used them, and our kids are fine. And so, I sold them on Facebook Marketplace but I had other friends that swore by them. Your kids can put their feet up. They won't be kicking in front of you. And you're like, okay, I need to get this thing, or I need to get the plastic placemats to cover the tray.
I fully bought those. I fully bought them.
I did too.
Never use them.
Never use them because it's just a pain to take them out, right? Like there are certain things that sound really, really great, but I'm like, I would rather just wipe it all down with a wipe or a Clorox wipe and call it a day than like put the thing on that my kid's gonna peel off anyway, And so toys and that kind of thing too. Like for us, what works really well when it comes to toys, we've done sticker books. My kids do love sticker books because as much as I love screen time for airplane travel, like kids don't want screens all the time. It hurts their brains just like it hurts ours. It gives them a headache. So sticker by number has been really helpful for us. My youngest, my 2-year-old, just needs one car, and he'll just roll that thing especially in the layovers, in the airport, just roll it all around. The cups, the stacking cups, those are good for babies all the way through. Like my 6-year-old, I'll be like, hey, why don't you take it on a scavenger hunt? And can you find whatever in mommy's purse or whatever? You can make it creative when you have different things that like work for all ages, but you don't need all of the fancy stuff. You need a roll of tape, right? And like a fake Bluey podcast and a lot of snacks. Definitely a lot of snacks.
Oh, never skimp on the snacks. Just so many snacks. Every possible thing that they could put in their mouth. Have that with you. No, when it comes to activities, one of my big things that I've been discovering over traveling with kids is anything that's flat. Like if it is a flat activity, like sticker books, like color wonder paper, and the paper and the markers will all fit in like a single folder. Anything that is flat, because what I'll do is I'll put that in like the laptop compartment of the backpack or the diaper bag, and it's flat and it all stays together and it doesn't interfere with anything else. So if it's flat, I'm interested in it as an occupational toy for the children. And that's been a very big thing. Also, nothing sticky other than stickers. And they have the cool stickers that are like, you can put them on and take them off again, like the ones that you can reuse. And those are great for airplanes because if your kid sticks it on the wall, you don't need to panic about, oh no, did I bring my chisel to get this off of the airplane wall? No, it's okay. It just comes right off.
Exactly why I only use the extremely washable markers or the water markers that are like invisible, because I'm not dealing with them writing all over the airplane wall when I'm not looking, because they will.
Color Wonder is the only travel option.
It is. Once they get a little older, you can do the washable ones because a wipe takes that right off. But you know, that's a little bit down the line. Okay, I do have a genuine question. Is the flight attendant mad at me when the fasten seatbelt sign is on and my 4-year-old is about to pee their pants? And I have to do it. I have to take them to the bathroom. Like, what? Tell me what to do. I'm scared.
Okay, so this is a tricky one, and I say this as a flight attendant and a mom. And the thing is that the seatbelt sign is on because we think something's going to happen. Like we think that there's going to be turbulence, which is why the seatbelt sign is on. And sometimes it's like we know it's not going to be that severe. And this is a pet peeve of mine is I'll be sitting there on the jump seat and people are like, I have to go to the bathroom. And I'll be like, but also I can't give you permission. If the seatbelt sign is on, it is absolutely at your own risk. But the seatbelt sign is on because we think, and the captain thinks, it is unsafe to have people up and around the cabin. The absolute worst time that you could possibly take anybody to the bathroom, whether it's yourself, and I see grown-ups do this a heck of a lot more than I see anybody with kids do it. It is grown-ups who need to keep their stuff together. When we are taxiing on the tarmac and the seatbelt sign is on, because it always is during taxi, you get up and go to the bathroom, we have to stop the plane. We have to stop the plane. And if we're getting ready to take off, we're going to lose our spot and we're not going to be able to take off. And if we've landed and you do this, you think, oh, it's not a big deal, I'm just going to run to the bathroom. No, it's a big deal. You have just messed up the landing patterns for however many aircraft were coming in behind us or on an alternate runway, or depending on where we are on the runway, you've just put us at risk for being hit by another plane, or that other plane with 300 people not being able to land at the airport because we have to stop the plane because you had to get up. Honestly, pee yourself, frankly. Like, I know that sounds terrible, but like, it is a better case scenario than the incredible level of danger that you could be putting yourself or someone else in.
Okay, that's actually excellent intel. Really good
that's
intel.
a grown-ups. That piece is a grown-up. So the worst is when we're taxiing, taxi, takeoff, landing. For the love, be in your seat with your seatbelt fastened. In flight, that is a little bit trickier. Like if it's not near landing, it's not near takeoff, and we're in flight, if the seatbelt sign has been off and it comes back on, you need to sit down. Like we anticipate that there's going to be something happening. And a lot of people think, oh, well, turbulence feels scary, but it's not scary. And that is true as long as you are buckled into your seatbelt, because turbulence can feel really scary. Like, don't get me wrong. I've been in some turbulence that is way scarier than a roller coaster. Now that I understand more of the physics behind it and I have more experience with it, I'm not freaked out by it. What I am afraid of during turbulence is people who are up and about in the cabin, because I have seen and know too many people who have been through things where you hit one air pocket and the captain knows it's coming. That's why they turn on the fasten seatbelt sign. They know it's coming. You hit that air pocket and boom, you hit the ceiling. And then when you come back down, you hit the armrest and you land on somebody else and then you break their arm because you've landed on them. So all of this is to say, it's situationally dependent. Flight attendants cannot tell you that you can use the restroom when the seatbelt sign is on, and you probably don't want to for your safety.
Yeah, that is good to know. I am glad to have all that information because, listen, we were running to catch a flight. We couldn't believe we got it, our layover. We sit down. We're the last people on the plane, right? And I have 3 kids in tow. Like, it's insane. I think at that point we were traveling with a car seat that we were using in the airplane as well. It was a mess. And we finally get in our seat, and the flight attendant starts their thing, and all of a sudden Anders is like, I gotta go. And I'm like, you can't, you just gotta wait. You gotta wait. And he's like, I'm gonna pee myself. And I'm like, you cannot go. And he's like, he has to go. And I was like, I mean, it was the worst moment of my life. And so the whole plane is watching because we're kind of near the front. And I'm like, what? I'm like, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. And I go and I tell the flight attendant, and I'm just like apologetic like as much as I can. I am so sorry. I don't know what to do. I know this is terrible. And they had to, of course, stop the announcements because they can't do it when someone's out of their seat. Anders goes to the bathroom. The whole plane is looking at us. And I'm just like, it was honestly one of the worst moments of my life. So, like things like that happen. And I know you guys are human and you understand that human things happen too.
Mm-hmm. They do.
It's just better.
They do. And it is, well, in that moment, that is just so like, just hearing about it makes me want to crawl out of my own skin because
because normally I would take him to the bathroom before we got on an airplane. But when you've run from one plane to another, you're literally running. What are you going to do?
Yes.
What are you going to do?
And I mean,
kids are kids.
Well, so maybe one of my tips there is to have extra diapers and pull-ups, even if your kids are potty trained. Truly, just have a backup plan that you can just scooch under them, and you've got to have backup clothes. Because like if there's a situation where it's truly turbulent, and we encountered some crazy turbulence coming in to Philly from London on our flight back, Betsy was really scared. She was like screaming, crying, scared. I've never seen her that scared in her life. And I was like, honestly, fair enough. Like that feels scary. It feels really scary. And because I am a flight attendant with a lot of experience in it, I was able to stay extremely calm and extremely regulated because that's literally what I do for work in that situation. But her fear was completely justified. And if that had been happening and she had to get up and go to the bathroom, I would have been like, no, kid, I'm sorry. You have to. It's just, if you need to let it go, let it go. We'll clean up later. We'll deal with the consequences. but you cannot get up at this time.
Next week, my dad's going to be on the podcast. He's a pilot. He flies for FedEx. And so I'm having come on to like pare down flight anxiety because I have it. I know other people do. So we're going to get into all of like the turbulence and what to do in certain like safety situations. And like, is it always a bad thing if your plane is nosediving? Because of course in my brain, I'm like, yes, that's terrible.
No.
And then, but like, you know, you learn that my dad has like walked me through different scenarios and I'm like, okay, I'm probably safer than I think up here in this flying metal tube.
Can I come back and be with your dad on that episode? Like, this sounds like so much fun.
I know. I'm so excited. I'm so excited. Okay, well, you know I could talk to you all day, every day, because we basically do. But I would love to hear what's something in your life that you're paring down right now. It might be physical, it might be a belief, it might be something you're learning. What are you paring down?
Well, I'm literally decluttering the house in anticipation of our third baby arriving. And Izzy was like, hey, what have you been up to? And I was like, I've been pulling a Shannon. That's what I've been doing, is I have been decluttering objects. And so many of the tips that I know I'm preaching to the choir if people are listening to this podcast, but so many of the things that you have shared on Instagram or that you shared on the podcast, I feel like have given me permission to let go of a lot of the physical things that truly I don't need, but I've been worried, oh, well, just in case. Oh, but I spent good money on this. And a lot of those stories that are in my head that I never have with me when I'm traveling, go figure, that exist in our house have been pretty well demolished. So I am literally paring down thanks to this podcast.
I'm honored and good for you. Love to hear it. Love to hear it. Okay, what's something that you're looking forward to right now?
I am 2 months out from finishing my Master of Divinity degree that has been a 5-year process while having 2.5 kids. Hopefully this one will still be gestating.
I was going to say, wait a second. Aren't you also 2 months out from having a baby? That's what I thought you were going to say. So they're going to happen at the same time?
I sure am. Yeah. So my due date is about 10 days after my graduation and the culmination of my ministerial internship, which takes place on the same day. So like those last 2 weeks of May are going to be interesting. And yes, my other 2 kids were both a bit early. So we'll see.
Oh my gosh. Well, that is a lot to look forward to. Okay. And lastly, where can everyone find you online?
You can find me on Instagram at Caroline Bright. It's just at Caroline Bright. It's just my name. I swept in there before anybody else got it. And I do have a blog that I'll update at some point soon and re-emerge into the world of the internet once I have finished this degree. Once I have mastered the divine, then I will re-enter. But folks can find me primarily on Instagram. It's at Caroline Bright. If you have any questions about au pairs or washi tape.
Truly a woman with so much insight.
I sure am.
Well, thank you a million for taking time out of all of your endeavors to come on the pod. I love you so much. And I'm so happy I got to expose my listeners to one of my favorite people. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, Shannon. #blessed.
You just listened to an episode of Paring Down with me, Shannon Leyko. If you enjoyed the show, it would mean the world if you can leave a review wherever you listen and share this episode with a friend. Those reviews really are what keeps a podcast on its feet for the long haul, and I will read every single one with a huge smile on my face, so thank you ahead of time. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to hit subscribe. Also, be sure to follow along on Instagram at Paring Down Podcast, where I offer lots of tips and inspiration for paring down, along with what's new here on the podcast. Till next time.